That'll be my excuse, my excuse all morning. Guys look for excuses, That's as long as we have an excuse, we're ready for the criticism. All right. I don't know if you saw, but my father's in the house today. And you wouldn't know it, but his identical twin is here too. Yes. You'll have to ask them who's smarter and, who's been more successful and competition for identical twins, Yeah. No? Dad says no? No competition there. See? Aunt Melissa, he's already competing with you. He says, no competition. I got her and everything. They're in from Michigan. It's good to see you, Aunt Melissa and Uncle Dave. Happy Father's to you, Uncle Dave. Genesis chapter 39, if you think about it, the Bible is full of family tragedies. A book that you would expect to really herald the family, and it does, but a book that you expect to show you what a family should be and how it should function, and it does, but it also shows you a lot of tragedy. And you think about the beginning of the Bible starts out with Adam and Eve. Of course, we know that they ate of the forbidden fruit, and they introduced the curse of sin on mankind. And when they decided to make a family, they had 2 boys. So the first 2 sons, the first 2 siblings, introduced the first official crime, the first murder, and the first death. So not a good start to the family unit. But the Bible records that. It doesn't hide the fact that families often have tremendous problems. And you don't have to read much further to see more problems. You can see Noah, after he saves his family from the flood, he goes and curses his grandson because his grandson did something he shouldn't have done. You can keep reading and you'll see Sarah banishing her stepson, Ishmael, tearing him away from his biological father, Abraham, tearing him away from his half-brother, Isaac. It records, the Bible that is, Jacob stealing his twin brother's birthright, great brother. Oh, that's right, he stole his blessing too. He stole everything from Esau, which the Bible then tells us that Jacob has to flee for his life. So we almost see another sets of brothers, twins, end in tragedy. But Jacob runs away, and they would be separated for 20 years. Just a minor detail the Bible records, but your twin brother you don't talk to or see for 20 years. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy, for sure. You can read in the book of Genesis, Reuben committing fornication with his father's wife. Not his biological mother, but his father's wife. You can read in the book of Job, Job's wonderful, dear, loving wife cursing her husband when he's sick, when he's lost everything. It's a tragedy. You can read Zipporah and Moses having a fight right outside of their motel. A fight that leads Moses to say, get out of here, woman, and she goes off to daddy, and they essentially break up. Moses, the great Moses. Not a great family guy, nor was his wife by any means. You can read Aaron and Miriam criticizing their brother Moses for some of his choices, which angers God, and then they have some issues there. You can read about Jephthah. Is there any more tragic story than Jephthah taking his daughter's life? Peninnah, what a pain in the tush she was, right? Poking her sister wife to try to get her to have a meltdown. She almost did. She had a near nervous breakdown. Poor Hannah had to put up with Peninnah. David's older brothers, they weren't charming by any stretch of the imagination. Here comes David bringing food to them. And while he's there in the battlefield, he wants to, help out and participate and support the cause. And they say, we know your naughtiness. Get out of here, little brother. Like, where's the support, man? None for him. Must we forget what the Bible records about David? He was a good son. All records would indicate he's a tolerant brother, but he was a lousy husband. He stole another man's wife. He killed that man to cover up his adultery. And in the process, his family was tore apart, and he would bury multiple sons. Very tragic record of family in David's life. And in all these situations, which are just a snapshot, really, of the difficulties that families have, even in the Bible, many of these characters did not manifest family-friendly behavior. They didn't come out with being good examples of family-friendly behavior. But there is one person we're going to talk about this morning, one guy who was a part of one of the Bible's greatest family tragedies, but he would arise, he would surface to be, in my opinion, the Bible's family man, the Scripture's greatest example of a true family man. We're going to talk about a guy whose life begins with the family, his story is about the family, and it ends about the family. Everything about this man's life was about the family. If you take away the family, you don't have a story to tell. And his name is Joseph. Joseph, one of my favorite Bible characters. There's much to speak about Joseph, but think about the life of Joseph. Those of you who know Joseph well, take the family out of his life and then tell me what you have to talk about. Take brothers out of his life, and what is there to Joseph's life that you want to talk about? Take parents out of the story. What is there you have to talk about? Take sons and future generations out of Joseph's story. There's nothing to talk about because Joseph was all about the family. Whether he liked it or not, that's where he was immersed into our Bible. The beginning of his story can be characterized by a love-hate relationship. Loved by his father, hated by his brother. He was the 11th son of his father Jacob. And at one point, because he was the 11th son, he was the baby of the family before Benjamin came along. And his father made a big mistake in making it clear to all the other brothers that he was the favorite. Parents learned that lesson. Jacob was not a good father by any means, but he put a coat of many colors on Joseph. He kept Joseph from some of the responsibilities. It was clear he loved Joseph more than the other brothers. And that was not good for the other brothers because they automatically then were prejudiced and skewed against him. They didn't like him. But Joseph in his youth, he was given a gift from God. He had the ability to dream dreams and interpret dreams. And God gave him these two dreams. One dream was about a sheaf, which he understood represented him. And then there were all these other sheaves that his brothers had that represented them. And in this dream, his sheep stood upright and the other sheaves bowed to his sheep. And so he woke up the next morning, went to breakfast, got his Fruit Loops and said, "Hey, bro, I had this dream last night. Hey, guys, gather around. This dream was awesome. You all worship me." And he didn't understand why they got up from the table and loathed him and hated him. He didn't get it. In his immaturity, he didn't realize that's a dream you keep to yourself, right? But he had another dream. And in this dream, there were the sun, the moon, and all these stars. There were 11 of those stars. And the same thing, he was there, and the sun, moon, and the stars bowed to him. They gave him reverence. And he woke up from his dream and ran to the breakfast table and told everybody, including mom and dad, "You're never going to believe what I dreamed last night. All of you are going to worship all of me." And didn't understand why his brothers hated him so much. Even his father said, "Joseph, you really think your mom and I are going to bow down to you?" So here he is, beloved of his father, hated by his brethren, has these dreams which make his brother hate him more, and as a result, his life would be immersed into tragedy. A story that we know well and have become callous to its emotions. But boy, was it a hard pill to swallow when he would experience a rejection that few of us will ever begin to relate to. Joseph, as a young man, would go out to visit his brothers in the field. And in the field, they would see him coming, and they've had enough of him. They plotted his demise, and they came up with this brilliant idea of pretending he died by some wild beast, but selling him into slavery, selling him into the human. We would know it today as the human trafficking economy. Now, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a 17-year-old boy who naturally looks up to his older brothers, he really lives a life of privilege because daddy gives him everything. And family is a big deal for a Jewish person, especially early in its history. And he goes out to find his brothers doing his father's service because his dad sent him out there to see how they're doing. And when he gets there, he notices in their eyes there's fury, there's rage, there's hatred, there's jealousy. And they grab him and they throw him into a pit. And he can hear him talking. Who are we going to sell him to? Maybe we should just kill him. How about we give him to them? We need to get rid of him. And he's hearing all these things. He knew they didn't like him, but he didn't realize he hated them. They hated him that much. And eventually they would pull him out of the pit. They would tie his hands, and they would offer him to the Ishmaelites who were traveling by for just a few pieces of silver. Now he's 17. He's not 37. He's not 47. He's not 27. He's 17. What does a 17-year-old think when his own brothers, the ones he always looked up to, the ones he always wanted to be like, what does he think when they're the ones that kick him to the curb for a few pieces of silver? This is how the story of Joseph begins. It begins in tragedy. We have a hard time if our sibling doesn't like us or like one of our pictures on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or something. Can you imagine all of your brothers saying, "Get out of here, kid. We don't ever want to see you again." It's tragedy. Yet, he would become the Bible's family man even despite this deep pain, even despite these deep scars. We are left in the dark for much of his life as far as how he felt about it, as far as the emotions, as far as his relationship with God, what he thought, how he dealt with it. But there's enough in his story that I believe merits us on this Father's Day to challenge every father in the midst of our congregation today to be more like Joseph. So you're in Genesis chapter 39. In Genesis 39, Joseph has made it to his final destination. He's hundreds of miles away from home. Surely it took days to get there. He has been walking, I'm sure bound, if not put into a cart, perhaps even caged. He's going to a place he's never been to. He's with people he's never been around. Perhaps he doesn't speak their language. He has no idea what awaits them. All he knows is he'll never see his father again. He'll never see his baby brother again. And his brothers, oh, the pain of his brothers selling him into slavery. When he gets here to Egypt, he is sold to a military man. His name is Potiphar. Potiphar quickly finds that this young man is studious, he's diligent, he does things well, he's responsible, and so Potiphar puts his new slave in charge of all the other employees and is in charge of everything in Potiphar's home. He's the head slave, if you would. Potiphar likes Joseph, but he's not the only one who likes Joseph. Potiphar's wife, we find out, likes Joseph. Verse number 7, we'll be just reading a few scriptures as we have a lot to cover this morning, but in verse 7, it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." Now, you understand, she doesn't mean come tell fibs to me. She doesn't mean come hang out and let's just tell lies with each other. She's referring to something far more devious. She's referring to something far more immoral. But in verse 8, he refused and said unto his master's wife, "Look, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house." He doesn't know what is with me in the house. He hath committed all that he hath to my hand. He trusts me. Verse 9, there is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because you are his wife. Look what Joseph says. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Wow, this is where the greatness of Joseph begins. This is where we realize we're dealing with a guy who is better than most guys, a man who approaches life with a better approach than most men. He is the Bible's family man because his deep respect and honor for God is manifested here in Egypt when there's no one else to watch up on him, no one to keep him accountable, no one to tell him he shouldn't do that. He's just been betrayed by his brothers. In his mind, probably forgotten of God in some way. But here he says, when he has the chance for a few moments of pleasures, says, I can't do it. How can I do this great wickedness against God? Why is Joseph the Bible's family man? Because when we first see him confronted with an opportunity to do wrong, he doesn't, because he values the sacred union between a husband and a wife. This man who had the opportunity to do something wrong did not, because it was the wrong kind of romance, the wrong kind of pleasure. But when he tells Potiphar's wife, "No can do, Lady Jane, I can't do that with you," he doesn't cite fear of his master. He doesn't cite fear of being caught by his boss, who is a military guy, right? If you're going to have an affair with another man's wife, you shouldn't pick a general. You shouldn't pick a military man. But he didn't cite that. He didn't say, "Oh, how can I do this? If Potiphar finds out, he'll beat the tar out of me." He didn't say, "If Potiphar finds out, he'll take my life. He'll put me in jail. He'll reduce me to a lower place on the ranks of slave." He didn't cite any of those things. what does he cite? He says, how can I do this against God? You understand at this point in human history, adultery has never been identified by God as a sin. At this point in human history, the seventh commandment of Israel's Judaism has not been given to the people. Joseph understood that violating another man's marriage is against the very creation of God. He had a deep respect for what God did when He created Adam and Eve. When God said, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." Joseph, as a family man, an unmarried man, a man betrayed by his brethren, a man who do not have a family, looked at Potiphar's wife and said, "You already have a husband, and God said that you and him are one flesh, and nobody should get it between you, and I'm not going to be the one that puts your marriage and your sacred union asunder, because that's God's design. That's God's entity." He saw marriage as something more than a societal norm, something more than a legal arrangement. He saw it as sacred. And so Potiphar's wife, day by day, says, "Hey, come on, just one time. Just lie with me. One time. It'll be fun. You probably will enjoy it too." Verse number 12, look at what Joseph does. The final time, when no one's around, she says, "Come on." She caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. Why is Joseph the Bible's family man? Well, I think it's pretty simple to start with this fact, that he would not be responsible for breaking someone else's sacred union with their spouse. He would not put another man's marriage asunder for a few minutes of pleasure. How does this apply to those of us who are fathers this morning? Well, if we are to be true family men, then we too must share the same values of Joseph. We must value the sacred union between a man and a woman. We must value the sacred union we have with our own wives and protect it. But we must also value the sacred union between other men and their wives and protect those unions. Can I say this without anyone thinking I'm too harsh? Any man willing to break the union of another man and another woman is not a true family man. Obviously, if you're willing to leave your spouse, guys, if you're willing to leave your wife, you're not really a family guy. I mean, you may say you are, but I'm telling you, you're not, because if you break up a marriage, you break up a family. But if you're willing to support or endorse or encourage or participate in another couple's demise, in another couple's divorce, in another couple's infidelity, then no matter how good you are with your kids, you're not a true family guy, because you're breaking up a family that God instituted. You know why the family unit is suffering today in our society? It's because people are more interested in being happy than they are in being holy. Adults today just want to do what makes them happy. And if I'm not happy with her, if I'm not happy with him, then I just got to call it quits. We'll be better friends when we're not in a marriage. With no regard to what that will do to a family. It devastates and it destroys a family. Being great with kids doesn't make us family men. Playing catch with our son, having a tea party with our daughter doesn't make us family men. First and foremost, if you want to be a great family guy, be great with your wife. If you want to be a great family guy, before you play ball with your boy, before you have tea with your daughter, learn to go out on dates with your wife and have fun with your wife. Because the marriage precedes the family. Great marriages make great families. Bad marriages make bad families. A loving father is usually the result of being a loving husband. A great father is usually the result of being a great husband. Family men want to see marriages succeed so that families succeed. I've heard some men that I'm close to or friends with, I've heard them talk about other marriages and other unions and what they think should be done and shouldn't be done. And anytime I hear someone supporting the dissolution of a marriage, unless there's an obvious clear-cut problem with infidelity or abuse, something like that, but if it's just because they're not getting along, then don't tell me you support the family if you're willing to break up a family. Marriage makes a family. Failed marriages fails a family. So to be family men, gentlemen, we must hold up the institution, the entity of marriage, ours and everyone else's. Turn to Genesis chapter 41. Genesis chapter 41, let's get on to the children now. I get the privilege of sharing the story of Joseph in short time with you this morning because we will share the whole story. And in Genesis 39, where you just were, Joseph had the strength, the moral fortitude to say no to Potiphar's wife. As a result, though, he ends up in prison. Falsely accused, but you are the slave, Joseph, and so your word means nothing. And so he ends up in prison. He's there for 2 years. While he's there, in come the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt's butler and baker. Evidently, they offended the king, and so the king said, you're going to go sit in a timeout in prison for a while. And while they're in prison, they have dreams. The baker has a dream about this bread in a basket. The butler has this dream about juice in a cup. And they're perplexed. They don't know what the dream meant. And so they come to Joseph, who's there, again, the keeper of the prison. He's in charge of all the prisoners because he's found favor with the keeper of the prison there. And they say, hey, do you have any idea what these dreams can mean? And he says, well, I actually do. I have this gift of God. I can interpret dreams. And says to the butler, this is really good news. You're going to be restored to office. You're going to get out of prison. Life's going to be great. The baker, tell me what my dream means. Well, you'll be hanged. Yeah, and that's exactly what he told them. That's exactly what happens. But before the butler gets released, he says, hey, remember me down here. I'm down here unjustly accused and convicted. Make sure you tell Pharaoh I need to get out of here. Well, the butler gets out and forgets all about Joseph until the king of Egypt has this dream, a perplexing dream. It's about cattle and stalks of corn and withering corn and lean flesh cattle, and he just doesn't know what it means. And so the butler says, oh, king, down in prison, there's this Jewish dude. He's great at interpreting dreams. I'm sure he can reveal your dreams. So the king of Egypt calls Joseph out. Joseph shaves, stand before the king. King tells him the dream, and Joseph says, I know what that means. It means there's going to be 7 years of prosperity, tremendous prosperity. The economy will be booming. It's like a Republican's in the office or something, and it will be booming. And then 7 years after that, it will, if you're a Democrat, I'm just joking, okay? I'm totally just joking. Relax. I do that once in a while just to see how sensitive you are. I know a lot of you are passionate about it, but relax, breathe. It means nothing to me, all right? So 7 years of prosperity, but then there's going to be 7 years of famine. And Joseph says to the king, piece of advice while we're on the conversation, you should save that corn for 7 years so it can sustain your nation for 7 years after that. Pharaoh says, you're the man. You are the man. I'm going to release you from prison, and I'm going to put a gold chain on your neck. I'm going to put a robe on you. I'm going to make you the prime minister. I want you to be the guy that oversees this. And so Joseph is finally vindicated. He's out of prison. He's standing now, not as slave, not as prisoner, but as the second in command. He's the prime minister of the nation of Egypt. It's a great moment. Verse 46, that's where we are. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Verse 46. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in verse 48, we see him gathering all the food for 7 years. And in verse 50, look what happens. It's an exciting moment for the family man. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bare unto him. So this is 18 years since he was sold into slavery. He's got 2 sons. And Joseph called the name, verse 51, of the firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of affliction. You know what Joseph did that all family men should take note of? He embedded deep spiritual meaning into the lives of his boys. He gave them names that they would learn to write in grade school and for the rest of their life would sign on every document. He gave them names that when people said their names in class or when they introduced themselves to someone new, he gave them names that had deep spiritual meaning. Every time they said, hey, my name's Manasseh, someone says, well, that's a strange name. What does that mean? Well, it means forgetful. Oh, are you forgetful? No, it means my dad. See, my dad was a Jew, and he was sold into slavery by his brothers. They were jerks, and he got into Egypt, and he was accused falsely by Potiphar's wife. She's a jerk too. Went into prison, and the butler forgot him. He's a jerk. And then he became the prime minister. And my dad named me Manasseh because at that point in his life, he said, God hath made him to forget all the problems. Manasseh had a deep spiritual meaning, the name, that he could not escape. Our names go with us for the rest of our lives, so choose the names of your children carefully. And then Ephraim comes along and someone says, Ephraim, I've never heard that name before. What does that mean? Well, it means fruitful. Oh, are you in the fruit business? Is your dad in the fruit business? No, it means, well, so my dad, he was in Canaan and he had 12 brothers. They were jerks. They sold him into slavery. Went to Potiphar's wife. And they get to the story, and my dad was just praising God because at that point in his life, God blessed him with 2 boys, his own family. We replaced that bad family back in Canaan. And my dad was praising God for our presence. So for the rest of your life, Manasseh, for the rest of your life, Ephraim, your very existence is linked indefinitely and permanently with the relationship your daddy had with God. Meaning, for the rest of their lives, they recognized that their names, their existence were a direct result of God's relationship with their father, which should have constantly been a reminder of their need to have a relationship with their father's God. What a brilliant move of this family man to say, hey, sons, if you ever walk away from God, you will be reminded every time you write your name on a piece of paper. You'll be reminded every time someone calls your name out in line. You'll be reminded every time you get a bill. You'll be reminded every time you get the mail that your name is something spiritual. So don't walk away from God. Don't forsake God. Remember where you came from. Remember who you are. Gentlemen, wow, we should follow this example to be true family men. Well, let me back up. Is it possible, and I thought about this in preparing for this, but is it possible that Joseph gave his boys the names that he did so that they would never forget what Joseph's brothers did to him, so that they would never do to each other what Joseph's brothers did to him? I mean, is it possible Joseph, who lived with these deep scars and the deep pain, who had to deal with his brothers selling him, rejecting him like that, said, I never want you, Manasseh, I never want you, Ephraim, to feel what I feel, to experience what I've experienced, to feel the pain that I felt, and I'm going to name you names so you never forget what happened to me, so you never forget how God blessed me, so you never repeat what my brothers, your uncles, did. Is it possible? Oh, I think it is. Regardless of why he did it, it had deep spiritual meaning. And if we are to do the best for our families, if we are to promote and nurture a healthy, strong family, gentlemen, we should embed deep spiritual meaning into the lives of our children. You may have already named your kids their names, that's fine, but do those things that put lifelong meaning into their minds as they grow up. You know what you should do? This is so important. You should be in church every Sunday with your kids. So that when they have their own freedom at the age of 18 or whenever they move out or whenever you give them that freedom, whenever you let them out of the dungeon, whenever you decide, that they say, going to church is just what we do. Not going to church is not what we do. You want to give your children the idea that Sunday is a day we go to church. You're embedding patterns in their life. You're embedding rhythm in their lives, and you're making it normal. You're making it proper. And by the way, going to church will only help your kids. Only help your kids. We need to do those things, those good and godly things in our homes that our children will never forget. You should read your Bible in front of your kids. You mean as a show? Yeah. To show them what adults should do. Read it silently, but read it visibly. Don't go off in your study. Don't go off in the den. Don't go off the basement. When you're sitting with your kids, get your Bible out and read it so that they think, oh, is that what we do as adults? Yeah, that's what Dad does. So that when they become a dad and they think, what did my dad do when I was growing up? Well, he was in the garage a lot, so I'll do that. He went out and hunted a lot. I'll do that. He went out and played golf a lot. I'll do that. All those are good. What else did he do? Oh, he read his Bible. I remember him reading his Bible. What you're doing is you're embedding deep spiritual meaning into the lives of your children. We should pray audibly and consistently so that it becomes a way of life for our children. To be a true family man, guys, we need to do those wise and virtuous things that stay with our kids for a lifetime. Genesis chapter 48, very quickly, if you can turn there, that would be great. Genesis chapter 48. Fathers, are you warm or cold? I asked the fathers, ladies. It's Father's Day today. Ladies, I do care about you, but guys, is it warm or cold in here for you? John, what do you think? If you're visiting with us, it's a constant battle, the temperature. I'm always warm because I'm the one working, up here moving around. So I was about to turn it down, but guys, if you say it's just right, we'll leave it there, and evidently your ladies will appreciate that. We are not turning it up, ladies. I'm sorry. So I'll take this off. All right. Genesis chapter 40. This is a really interesting passage. It's a passage that we as Westerners do not emulate in any way. What we're about to read is a grandfather blessing his grandchildren. It's a patriarchal blessing, deep in tradition, rich in history with the Middle East, but especially the Hebrew people. But just understand, we are almost 20 years removed from what we just read. So Ephraim and Manasseh are around 20 years old. A lot has happened in 20 years. In 20 years, Jacob saved up all the corn and sustained an entire nation, fed the people. The people would bring money. The people would bring lands. They would mortgage their houses to get that food because nothing was growing. So Joseph became very wealthy. He was the prime minister. He was overseeing the treasury of everything here. So he became wealthy. His 20-year-old boys are probably doing just fine. They probably all have all the little toys they want. They have all the clothes they want, the food they want, the education that they need. They've got everything. They're living in royalty. Meanwhile, Jacob, who is Joseph's father, and Jacob's brothers, the ones who sold him into slavery, they come into Egypt because they need food because the famine is that widespread. In the process, to boil down a lot of activity and a lot of drama, Jacob reveals himself to his brothers. They're shocked to see their brother A is alive, B is doing as well as he is, and then C are shocked that he doesn't want to kill them for what he did to them. Jacob and his brothers then move into Egypt where they are fed and nurtured and preserved essentially. But Jacob, whose name is Israel in the passage, is dying. His eyes are fading, and so he's about to say goodbye, and that's why there is this blessing. So let's read verses 13 through 20, and we'll move quickly through this part of our lesson this morning. Verse 13, and Joseph took them both, Ephraim, who is the younger, in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh, who is the eldest, in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him, Jacob, Israel. And Israel stretched out his right hand. See, the right hand is the hand of blessing. That's why we refer to somebody as a right-hand man or a right-hand woman. And Israel, with his right hand, lays it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger. And he put his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And in verses 15, 16, he blesses Joseph. And then in verse 17, we read that Joseph, when he saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. But his father refused and said, I know it, my son. I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And we read in verse 20 that he, Israel, blessed them, Manasseh and Ephraim, that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. That's the saying now that they use in Hebrew culture. God bless thee as Ephraim and Manasseh. But there's the patriarchal blessing. Why are we reading this passage? Well, I want you to see what may appear to be an insignificant detail to you, but it's so important for our children. Joseph, this man who is so passionately involved with family from the beginning, he here as a father, after embedding spiritual value and meaning into the lives of his boys, he is passionately pursuing the blessing of God for his children. How do I know that? Do Ephraim and Manasseh probably not have everything they could ever ask for? Yeah, they probably have everything they need. They don't need any more blessings, materially speaking, materialistically speaking. But when Joseph sees his father put his right hand on the young boy, Joseph says, whoa, 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 this is the firstborn. The firstborn gets a special blessing. That's how it works, Dad. You can't remove your hand from Manasseh and put it on Ephraim. You've got to put it on Manasseh. Why was he so passionate about that? Because he didn't think a father's blessing on his children was hocus pocus. He didn't think it was insignificant. He realized that Jacob had some pull with God, that a patriarch, a father, a padre had some connection with God to bring a blessing down on his boys. And he said, I want the greatest possible blessing of God on my oldest son as well as on my youngest, but my oldest should get the best one. He's the firstborn. And when Jacob says to his son, don't worry, calm down, Joseph. They're both going to be great, but Ephraim is going to be greater. Joseph backed off. Once he heard this prophetic patriarchal pronouncement that both will be blessed and both will be great, Joseph backed off. But the story, in my opinion, it shows that his great opinion, his passionate displeasure with his father indicated that he knew his boys needed more than all the goods of Egypt. They needed more than all the blessings of the prime minister. They needed the very blessing of God Almighty on their lives to be successful. And again, to make it applicable to all the fathers in our room this morning, if we are to be true Bible family men, then we must also passionately pursue the blessing of God on the heads of our boys and girls. Our kids need more than education to be successful in this life. Our kids need more than the food we give them for their bellies and the clothes we give them for their backs and the shingles we give them for a roof over the head. They need more than that to be successful in this life. They need more than what we can offer them. They need more than universities and trade schools. They need more than finances and connections. They need more than all the lessons we can teach them. They desperately, our boys and girls, need the very presence and blessing of God in their lives to be successful. And the true Bible family man, the man who wants to see his family flourish, the man who wants to see his children flourish in life, he is passionately pursuing the blessing of God in his children. How? By getting up every morning, every day, and saying, God, please protect my children. God, please, by name, watch over my son, watch over my daughter, watch over my daughter. God, keep them from addiction, keep them from deception, keep them from perversion. God, may they fear you, may they love you, may they know you, may they serve you. God, convict them to get into your word. God, help them to see that wisdom is necessary. God, please bless my kids. Give them the right spouse at an early age. Keep them from the wrong people at the early age. God, bless them every day. Every day, because you recognize you can't do for your kids what God can do. And you can't afford your kids to go off in a big scary world without the blessings and the presence of God upon them. You know what else you should do to pursue passionately the blessing of God on the lives of your children? Again, I'm sorry, but I'm a pastor. You need to be in church with your kids. You need to get them under the teaching and preaching of the Word of God. I can say things to your kids, if they're paying attention, that they will listen to because they've heard you say it 10 times and they've turned you off. They might actually hear it from me. Next week we've got a missionary. Children will listen to a missionary. It's a new voice. It's a new person. It's a new personality. And if they're in church, God just might get a hold of them. And they might get the blessing of God upon them and be successful. So that's my challenge to you, gentlemen. One final thing very quickly. Turn to Genesis chapter 50. Oh, and this is my favorite one. This one is the one that really crosses into adulthood. It certainly belongs in the childhood of our kids, but fathers are always going to be examples, no matter where our kids are in their phase of life. And in Genesis chapter 50, Jacob has died. He has died, they have buried him, and we're going to read now in verse 15 about what takes place after the death of Jacob. Verse 15, and when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph. It's akin to texting him, all right? It wasn't very personal. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father, not our father, thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall you say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto thee evil, and now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. Real courageous brothers here. But I want you to see what happens when he gets the text message. When he hears from the messenger these words that his brothers were afraid that he would punish them, throw them into jail, and requite them of all the evil they did unto him. What does it say there? It says that Joseph, big Prime Minister Joseph, big adult Joseph, wept when they spake unto him. Why do I think Joseph is the Bible's family man? Because here he is as a grown man weeping at the news that his brothers thought he would do them harm. Now look at verse number 18. I love it. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face. And they said, Behold, we be thy siblings? No, thy servants. And remember those dreams I talked about earlier in our story? Joseph's sheaves stands upright. All the other sheaves are bowing. Joseph's being bowed to by the sun, moon, and stars. And Joseph in his young, immature mind thought, man, you guys are going to be worshiping me. I'm going to be the most important man in this family. Didn't know. Decades down the road, many decades down the road, they would bow to him. But it wasn't because he was more important. It wasn't because he was the master. It was because he was the glue. It was because he was the one that was going to keep them all together. This wasn't about authority. It was about opportunity. It wasn't about power. It was about privilege. Joseph was privileged to be the guy that fed his family, sustained his family, and said, hey, I lost you for 20 years. I'm not losing you for the rest of them. You hurt me, but I'm not going to hurt you. Verse number 19, and Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you thought evil against me. But don't worry, God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not. I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. Number 4, most important part of our story this morning for all the family men in attendance this morning, a true Bible family man will demonstrate grace and forgiveness for his children. Do you think Ephraim and Manasseh didn't know exactly what their uncles did to their papa? Well, they knew. Well, how do you think they felt about Uncle Judah, Uncle Simeon, Uncle Reuben, Uncle Gad, Uncle Naphtali? Let's get into the story now. You're a 20-year-old, and you know that Uncle Judah sold your papa into slavery, where he ended up spending time in slavery and in prison. Do you like Uncle Judah? Do you like Uncle Reuben? Do you like Uncle Simeon? Or do you say, you rat? That's my dad you did that to. Yeah, they're young men. Don't give them the maturity of a 50-year-old person. They're young men, full of testosterone. Like, look what Dad's doing now. He's taking care of you. Right? That's what these guys are thinking. And they watch their father weep, which makes them weep inside. Like, oh, what's Dad doing here? Dad, now's your shot. Grandpa's gone. Now you're the prime minister. And he says, fear not. As he's weeping, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he spake kindly to them. Ephraim and Manasseh are watching this thinking, holy smokes. If Dad can forgive these bums, these cruel dudes, we got to forgive everybody. You see, we demonstrate something to our kids whether we think we are or not. We can demonstrate grace and forgiveness, or we can demonstrate stubbornness and pride. All day, every day in our homes, how we treat our wives, gentlemen, How we respond to our wives, we are demonstrating something to our kids. Are we demonstrating how to keep an argument going, or are we demonstrating how to kill an argument? Are we demonstrating how to be mean and nasty, or are we demonstrating how to be loving and kind? See, we're demonstrating something, and a good man, a family man who wants to nourish a family, keep a family together, flourish a family, he's the man who tells and shows his kids how to keep a family together. You know how you do that, boys? Manasseh, Ephraim, you know how we keep a family together? Family strong. We show grace and forgiveness. Yeah, but Dad, what they did is unforgivable. Hey, I'm not in the place of God. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their cruelty. Good point. Yeah. Gentlemen, let's be real this morning before I let you go enjoy your meal. If Joseph could forgive his brothers, why can't we forgive ours? If Joseph could forgive his brothers, why can't we forgive our sisters? If Joseph could forgive his brothers, why can't we forgive our in-laws? If Joseph could forgive his brothers, you ready? Why can't we forgive our wives? If Joseph could forgive his brothers, why can't we forgive our sons? If Joseph forgave his brothers, why can't we forgive our daughters? You see, your parenting does not stop when you send your children off to school or to their new spouses. What you do as an adult, Dad, demonstrates what your children will probably do as an adult. And the father who demonstrates grace and mercy will demonstrate how to keep a family together and how to flourish a family. We are either giving our children, dads, a terrible excuse to hold grudges, or we're giving our children a terrific example to extend grace. We're either giving our children a terrible excuse to win an argument, or we're giving our children a terrific example to turn an argument into a loving, productive conversation. So much could be said about Joseph. But I think very little could be said about him if you remove the family from that topic. He is the Bible's family man. And so you and I, guys who are dads this morning, we have ourselves a tremendous example in how to be true Bible family men. Let's stand and have a word of prayer.